93 got that beat.
What's going on, family? It's your brother Lawrence here with another episode of Watch God Work. In every episode, we get the distinct pleasure to talk to a brother or sister who's doing exceptional work in every field of human endeavor, and they share their God stories, the ways in which God has been at work in their life and the ways in which God is at work in their work. And today I have my sister, our sister, Candace Newman. What's going on, sis?
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I am really, really grateful to be here with you and to have this conversation. Shout out to LA, as I always say. Anytime I'm speaking to an Angelino, it's just the energy got me a little different. You got to come differently
Yes,
to my
a real
Angelino.
Angelino, born and raised.
Yeah, I mean, like real, real. I don't know. I was like, because sometimes people say LA, but they're like, oh, I'm Glendale, and I'm like, is that really, so, um,
I'm born and raised in the greater areas of Los Angeles, California. Definitely LA to the heart, LA to the core. Hustle hard like an LA Angelino, and
yeah, I mean,
and love. And I'm real like an Angelino. We get a lot of transplants that come to LA, and they have all their perceptions and their guards up, compared to other locations. And I just say, the real LA folks are far different than the people who've transplanted here. So you know what I'm talking.
yeah, there were little light shots. There's some light shots, maybe for the transients. There's some light shots, but we ain't gonna take too many, on it. But I think offline we chatted a bit, and I have such great just admiration and for the work that not only that you're doing, but you have done over a decade plus, but you put time in an industry and an experience of live events, touring, being and doing it at the highest of levels. I'm saying highest of levels globally in a market, a North American market, even beyond that. And I think we were even just talking about just the connection of touring of some of our greatest artists of our time. You have had a hand in that work in some way or another, right? And you found early on in your life just connection to events and music that this was going to be the journey and the path that you've been on. But as much as I could say, as we talked about, like there's a lot I could say about the work that you've done. I can't say it any better than you can. And so, why don't we start here? Who is Candace Newman?
That is an excellent question, and it's interchangeable because I'm ever evolving. But I would say, as of today, Candace Newman is a woman of God. I do everything with intention, with God at the forefront of that, and very purposeful in my life and my work. I am a mother, which I'm extremely proud to be, and I'm building a legacy so that I can make sure that my son does not start at a deficit in his life and he has an advantage more than I've ever had before. I am an entrepreneur and a music executive and a businesswoman. I'm extremely purpose-driven and community-based work where I am looking to create create space and empower the next generation of our future in the live music industry, specifically within the touring space, where I'm most passionate about because that's where my career derives. So that pretty much sums up who I am for now. But again, it's ever evolving. I just want you to know I'm constantly growing but God and my son are forever going to be a part of that.
I think especially when you've done all the work that you've done, there could be a different way you tell your story around just kind of the mountaintops that you've been on. But I think what draws people to your story and to use just the humility of it to say, even with all that I'm doing, I understand what's important, but also I'm also growing and evolving. I think there's people's stories who's like where they look to impress people and those who their stories look to inspire people. And I think there is a great universal about, your beginnings, right? It was not necessarily easy. Born, to teen parents, by the grace of God, you came into this world and we thank God for that. But it wasn't easy navigating, just kind of, let's just say the instability of that experience. Yeah. Just for you, if you kind of take myself back to that time and just being in instability and trying to find a place where you were consistently and healthily loved well, right? To what degree, how was that like the groundswell of your relationship with God, right? Just that experience early on. Talk to us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I grew up, I was born to teenage parents. So I was raised by teenage parents and obviously their parents because they were still being raised by their parents.
Mm.
So having to navigate just growing up with them and figuring things out for myself while they also were figuring things out for themselves. And then they made decisions for their lives that did not benefit me, of course, because they were still growing and learning and evolving into whoever they were meant to be as people. But a lot of times it did not include nurturing and fostering and developing me as a young
Mm.
woman. So I had to rely on people outside of my parents, immediate family members, a lot of people who were teachers and counselors and just role models that I looked up to, that I gravitated to, just to kind of pick up certain characteristics that I felt that were key for me to develop and grow as a woman. I knew that I saw so many things as a young woman that young people should not see,
Mm.
and I wanted my life to be different. I knew there was just something in me, and I believe that something was God that was preparing me for a different life than the one that I had been exposed to, that I was born into, that my parents had. I believe that God wanted me to experience a lot of hardships to strengthen me and prepare me for what was to come, because I've had so many other hurdles to overcome throughout the time, but I needed the strength from childhood on in order to overcome those things. So I believe that, you know, um, just growing up in foster care, growing up with being displaced and not having a stable home, and a lot of times left me isolated, lonely. Sometimes I lacked the self-assurance and self-confidence that I needed to continue to thrive and move forward in a lot of ways. So I had a ton of failures because of that. I didn't have anyone to kind of point me in the right direction or to kind of just prop me up.
Mm.
So there was a lot of, learning the hard way, but I was always exposed to God. It's not like I had obviously parents and people who were taking me to church, but occasionally I went to church. Occasionally I experienced God in a lot of ways. Occasionally I had a ton of people praying over me and praying for me in my life, and that is what really made me a believer.
Mm. Mm.
And that belief led me to um, a greater relationship with God, eventually becoming a disciple in the kingdom. I was baptized so that I studied the Bible, just so that I can kind of dive deeper into my relationship with the Lord. And, a ton of other hardships came about and I had to endure, but I knew that I always carried my cross with me. I knew I always had God with me. And so that is, how I got to where I am. Ultimately, honestly, I can't think of any other way other than the strength that he's instilled in me and helped me develop in him,
Mm.
honestly.
It's I appreciate you sharing that, because obviously it's not easy to share that openly. But I think you've been really generous. I think to the world of sharing that story in ways that could help other people. But I also hear this village mindset, right? There's the thinking of like, if I don't have a father, if I don't have a sister, I'm a brother. Like in the community, I have one, right? In the church, I have one. In this, I have
Yes.
one. And even when I think of the nature of the work you're doing now, Live Out Live, and it's this idea of like, well, we have these resources. How do we raise up the next generation? So they may not traditionally get it because their uncle is this and their such and such is this, but whether Grammy weekend or whether whatever it is, how do we create spaces where the village can come around them to help? So I think it's easy. I think it's helpful for people to understand the connection that came out of pain, and the feeling of being displaced, the feeling of those who should be there for me to help me elevate are not necessarily doing so. Um, what was it? I'm going to ask this question, but even before pushing, because what was it about God, though, right? That made him worth holding on to, because I think you're navigating the difficulties of life, but just everyone goes to God for different reasons. What was it for you that made God real and just like, okay, I need him, like he's real and I need him?
So you touched on something about how it is difficult to share that story because I used to be ashamed of that story.
Mm,
I used to feel like, if I told people that I had this dirty past, then they wouldn't see my beautiful future. But that
mm,
past has allowed me to evolve into this beautiful future that I have,
mm,
and it's a lot of other people's story. So I felt like as I've grown and evolved and mature as a young woman, that it's a story that I should share. It's a story that actually empowers me
mm,
to share and to be who I am today. So you mentioned that it's not an easy story to share. I had shame attached to that story for a very long time.
mm,
But it was nothing of my doing, and I had to realize that it was just something that I had to experience.
mm,
So now that I've experienced it and I've overcome in a lot of ways, I'm still healing in a lot of ways, but I'm doing the proper work to heal and to become the woman that I'm ultimately meant to be, because that's definitely a process. But what was it about God that made me want to lean into Him and continue to talk to Him and be with Him? And it was the world around me, the awe-inspiring experiences that I had.
mm,
Honestly, when I see certain things, even the smallest things, I'll sit at my desk and I'll be working and I hear the birds chirping, or I'm laying in bed and I hear the birds chirping, or I hear nothing, and I hear the wind blowing, and it's such simple references, but all glory to God, honestly, because it's like those little things bring me a little bit of solace and peace,
mm,
and know that I'm thought of. Or when someone calls me when I'm in a hardship, in a hard place emotionally, or when there's my mind is racing and they call me just to either pray for me or think of me or let me know that I'm loved. To me, I feel like that's God. Like when I need it the most, I feel like that's God just giving me a hug or giving me a kiss. And so I like to think of Him in that way, as very much present in my life. Or just when I've overcome some really difficult trauma, or if I've experienced some really difficult trauma, I and then I end up overcoming that and using that as a stepping stool to what's next for me. I look at that as God wanted me to have this path instead of that
mm.
path. I thought I wanted that, but obviously this was a better plan for me, and this is God's plan. So it's little things like that that continue to allow me to lean into Him and believe in Him and know that He's
Mm.
real.
Yeah. I want
So
to.
from the
I,
smallest things like hearing the birds chirp and seeing the ocean, because I'm here in Los Angeles, so
mm.
I have access to see the ocean, and it's glorious and vast.
Light
So
flex, light
seeing those
flex.
things, yes, to to my
No, it's all good.
bad.
Keep going, keep going.
to again overcoming trauma and knowing that I had to experience those things in order to have the greater and grander life experiences that are in front of me. And my plan is far less important than what God has planned for me, because when I want something so bad, I hold on to it, and then God show me all the reasons why I don't need it and I shouldn't have it, and then gives me something grander and greater and bigger. And so I just have to believe in Him, and I have to trust Him and know that He has a better purpose and plan for
Mm.
me. And so it's all of those things that I've actually lived and experienced and seen, and allows me to lean into Him and believe in Him and continue to seek
Mm.
Him.
I this is I want to keep pressing in this direction, because I think this is gold. But I think it's a consistent theme of presence. You talk about the presence of God, whether through the birds chirping or just the sense of, wow, someone called me at this time, or wow, God was in. Consistently, the presence of God is different. Now it now makes sense, I think, in the larger conversation you and I are having about your gifts over for most of the kind of your career, that you have been enamored and also gifted in a space of presence, that people, right, have experiences and are participating in experiences where the presence of active live experiences where they get nearer to something that they adore, and how that even is just
Yes.
a mirror and a reflection of God. And God, the presence of Jesus was necessary. Why did He need to come? Right? Because presence is important. So that seems to be consistent. But so from my understanding of the story, it's kind of like you kind of put things together in terms of your work at I mean at Cal State Fullerton. You're like, all right, yeah, I like to do the events, I like to do the music, and now I'm gonna kind of put it together and I'm gonna do this work. But it wasn't like an overnight thing. you put time in, and I think most people from the outside of LA would understand or believe that, becoming an executive assistant, becoming a project man is like the door in. What kept you faithful during that time, even though you had this larger view, and then you were in this position where you're like, I'm doing this role. This is not ultimately. How did God keep you motivated when you were just not necessarily where you wanted to be, but you were working your way slowly in an industry that isn't necessarily the most meritocracy? Like, how did you manage all of that during that time?
Well, I mean, I always wanted to work in the music industry.
Mm-hmm.
It was my dream. Because music was like the soundtrack to my life. It was a coping mechanism through my hardships and my displacement. I always had music. It was one of the most consistent things for me. So I was just, you know what, I need to work in the music industry. I ended up going to Cal State Fullerton, and I got a full scholarship because I was a ward of the court and I had emancipated out of foster care. So again, that was all part of my purpose. Like, being in foster care led me to get a full ride into this university that allowed me to get a full education that exposed me to this job as an event manager on campus. So you see, all of these things kind of fell into place. I had to go through those things in order to get to this place here. So the music was a coping mechanism and always dear to me, and something that I knew I wanted to work in the music industry my entire career. I just didn't know how and why. But God obviously knew, because he was making sure that I had the proper steps to lead me there. So my full scholarship that I received as an emancipated ward of the court who experienced foster care, who had promise and purpose in their lives, I had to obviously go through some hoops and loops to acquire the scholarship, and I had to maintain it, academically. But it is what led me to this university where I worked as an event manager on campus, and I learned any and everything that you can learn about the event space when it comes to event setup and audio and visual and tear down and just organizing and timelines and things like that go into producing an event. And so I did that throughout my entire college career. And so I knew that I wanted to combine them, in some way. I loved events. I was having a great time doing it. And I loved music because it was my coping mechanism and aligned with my passion. So I wanted to combine them. And so through combining them, I sought out opportunities, obviously, to work in the live event space. And I didn't have any immediate opportunities because there just was not any immediate opportunities there for me. And I didn't even know how to go about acquiring those immediate opportunities, right? But again, God knew that there was a place for me in that industry, which is, might I add, a very marginalized sector in the music entertainment industry. Like, you have labels and you have agencies and you have a ton of other platforms that allow for, production and artists and just creative space. But when it comes to the music side of the music business side of the industry, live events and touring and concerts are extremely marginalized. It's an extremely marginalized sector, and it's a very tight-knit, best-kept secret industry amongst an elite, we'll just say. So I never even imagined having access to that. But God was like, I'm going to prepare this place for you so when you're ready. So I navigated post-college. I went through working for a couple of entertainment companies. I worked for Universal Music Group, which allowed me to kind of get my wheels spinning about the music industry. And then I also created a couple of businesses and worked on the side, a couple of side businesses within the event space for a couple of vendors, for a couple of wedding planners, and just so that I can have a well-rounded, well-versed experience in the events world, right? And use that as transferable skills to wherever I was meaning to go and plan to land. So eventually I landed a job at Live Nation where I was an executive assistant, and I ultimately thought, let me just get my foot in the door here. This is kind of a company that I think that I want to explore more opportunities in. It is a live event, so that is an opportunity to start to evolve and develop in that space. So I got my foot in the door as an executive assistant, which I felt that I was overqualified for, but humble enough to take it on because I know who I am. I know that I can get in there, rock it out, and then, have a trajectory there. I was not right about that.
Mhm.
There were a ton of hurdles, which I was willing to overcome them and go through the motions and work hard. So I did a lot of working hard, but I hit a lot of roadblocks. Having to constantly advocate for myself as a Black woman. I wasn't the typical type of person that they wanted to see thrive in that space. I didn't have the experience according to them, or, I would say, I'm trying to, say these things the correct way so that it really resonates with people and inspires people. So I would say that I had to just advocate for myself a lot and allow them to see my not only my potential, if I didn't have the skills now, that I'm trainable, that I'm competent enough to learn and grow and develop and be developed and be championed, but I just was not the one that was championed constantly. So a lot of my trajectory involved me really advocating for myself, really putting my name in the hat and having to really prove who I am as a professional. And so eventually I started to grow. And after about, I would say 10 or 11 years, I eventually made it to become a senior tour director, where I was autonomously working on live tours and concerts globally. And when I say work on them, that involves working on them from fruition through execution. That is working with agents and managers and creating business plans and projections and creating tour routings, and working directly with venues and ticketing and marketing and box office and tour managers and road reps and between everyone throughout the entire process. Eventually I got there. But it was not easy, just like life is not easy. But I made it, and I made it as one of very few Black women in that space, in the booking and tour production space. There were no other Black women, there were no other Black people, actually. And so, I did inquire about representation, like, hey, this doesn't seem normal. Where are all the other women or people of color? And a lot of times I was told, well, they just aren't qualified. They just don't get this space. But I was thinking, when I came in, I didn't ultimately get it, although I was preparing a path for it. But everyone is trainable. Everyone is teachable. But I do know that everyone that looks like me is competent and capable. So that's what inspired me to create Live Out Live, ultimately. While I was still working at the company, I created Live Out Live because I was just super passionate about wanting to create space for more diverse faces in that industry. I did not want to be an only one. I knew that, because ultimately we can be, as Black people and Black women, successful Black women, we could just be excited and happy about our success, know that we made it, and not think about any other people outside of that. But my heart was for other people. My heart is for my community. My heart is to allow us the same playing field, to give us access and opportunity. And whatever we do with that access and opportunity is totally up to us individually, but at least give it to us. And so that is what inspired me to create Live Out Live. So I know that was a mouthful, but I wanted to kind of take you on my journey and then tell you what inspired me to create Live Out Live, because that is what I'm most passionate about at this point in my career.
That was a gift. Thank you for kind of taking us along the journey. There's so many things that pop up. There's so many things that pop up in my mind. I'm going to anchor on one, but one, just kind of the journey, even pre you really getting that opportunity in the door. With the live touring company at that time. You did Social Butterfly. Shout out to that. You had all your businesses rocking. You did everything that you needed to do to make it work. But there's just something about what's interesting about what you're saying is that I think even with people with some surface knowledge of the music business, you were at a nexus. One, because you touch every part of the supply chain, so to speak, but also from a actual artist take-home perspective, it's pivotal because at least the understanding of the business and the economics of the business is that's really where the recoup happened, because they didn't really make money on the actual distribution of the actual product in the music. And so you're sitting at such a interesting nexus and point for the business. I have to ask this, and this is why this is so helpful for people, because there's so many brothers and sisters that are graced for this. You are graced for this, right? There are people who lose their mind just trying to like set up brunch plans. They're like, I can't plan it. I got to run a show. Like, no. Like the group chat is all everybody's losing their mind, right? But you have been graced to step into something that there's so many moving parts. There's relationship management of talents, representation for
Yes.
talent, moving parts at my brain is just going like this. I can imagine the tax of the high stress, the just over time, while you're all navigating internal stuff and politics and all that stuff, you have to execute a very high pressure,
Yes.
volatile, dynamic space.
Yes.
How were you able to maintain, like, how did your faith allow you to have peace in a storm of work? Because it just seems like that over time. You're graced for it, of course. You're gifted and anointed for it. But just how did you maintain peace and actually took care of yourself mentally and spiritually through a lot?
Yeah, I would say during that time I was married and I had my son, and those things gave me purpose outside of work. Those
Mm.
things truly kept me going. My family had nothing to do with the industry that I was in. It's not like I had my spouse, my husband was not in the industry that I was in. So when I went home, I didn't have to talk about it, and unless I was venting about my experience and my emotions. And then he talked to me from a different perspective other than work hard, get ahead, do this. It was very much a calm for me.
Mm.
And being a mom was a calm for me during that time. So it allowed me to turn off a little bit and focus on what was important for me. A lot of people within the fold of those industries, they don't have family. They're just all about the grind and they don't balance it out. So when they're all about the grind and they don't have a balance, then the grind is their family. The grind is everything. The work is their family. The work is everything to them. But I wanted to have a balance in that. I wanted to say you could have it all. You can have a family, you can have the peace and the calm, and you can turn off sometimes. But also you can have this career where you're turning up all the way. So I need a balance. I'm a Libra. I'm all about being balanced, being fair to myself, and that is where that comes in at. And so God is obviously very much in the center of that calm and that peace. He was the one that was overseeing my family and the dynamics there. We went to church together. We prayed together. We had peace together. We had vacations and time away together. So those things kind of just balanced me off, honestly, and allowed me to know that my life is bigger than just this career in this space, but I can still do that at a high, excellent level as well when I'm tapped into it. So I try to do everything, honestly, with intentionality, with focus, and with all my power. So when I was able to turn it back on with work, then it was nothing. It was no problem. It was secondhand. It was second nature. But I knew how to turn it off to find my peace and my balance also. And I tapped into my family for that. So it was just an important time for me to have that balance for both.
I think that's a word I've been having these conversations and I'm seeing these conversations around, the importance of building a life, right? And I think especially over the past year, let's just say this is evergreen, but this is like from a public health perspective. There's the reality of like, okay, what happens when that area of my life shifts? What do I have? Where's my real identity when that shifts? And I think you could speak to that from a place of, okay, everything's in sync and I've been able to manage and navigate and I have, my family and all that stuff. But then also you can speak to that place from a place of, okay, I'm walking through the shadow and navigating what it looks like for me to understand what that looks. I'm interested. I'm really interested in your rhythms. I think not just then, but your rhythms now, but how you best connect with God. Because I speak to. Let's keep it live, y'all. We always keep it live on this conversation. Just in these times, I think God is shedding a light about just what's not sustainable for our people. And
Mm-hmm.
shout out to Jesse, Coach Jesse. We chopped it up, not too long ago, and she talks about how the stress levels, particularly of Black women, of what they carry, and it upregulates and fibroids, and that's every just the stress and what you're carrying, right, is just not what we were designed to bear. And so, because of that reality, and me as a brother, understanding but not understanding it because I'm not you, how do you connect with God? What are your rhythms and routines with God that allows you in the world that it is, in everything that you manage, to just make sure you're taking care of yourself practically? What does that look like for you day to day?
Some practical ways that I connect with God is just simply waking up with Him first.
Mm,
That's my hashtag, Him first. It's
mm,
always Him. Everywhere I put on all my socials, Him first, because I want people to know that that is what matters most to me. So first, it starts with Him, some quiet time with Him, meditating on a word with Him, just sitting and being still with Him.
mm,
Um, Obviously, that's who I think about throughout my day. He's on my mind throughout my day. I'm constantly thanking him for the good things that are happening, and or stopping and praying about things that I'm stressed about or dealing with in
mm,
general. um, I'm doing that in front of my kid. I'm doing that as an example to my kid. He'll walk in on my quiet times. He can join me, or not, but as long as he sees the type of mother that he has, that is super important for
mm,
me. And just being a person who operates from a place of integrity,
mm,
values, and morals is how I can honor God. Again, by doing what I'm supposed to do as a woman, being kind to people, leading with that type of attitude and
mm,
character is how I'm honoring God. Being a good steward over what He's blessed me with is how I'm honoring God. Every single day, those are some practical things that I'm doing. So yeah, that's how I honor Him, by being a good steward over my finances and my resources. I don't worry about money
mm,
because not because I'm making a ton of money, but because I've been blessed with the know-how and the resources to make
mm,
money and to get money and to maintain money. I know this is financial awareness
mm,
month. I own several properties that I've been owning for several years. So when I had very little, I did much with it. So now God has blessed me with so much more. I'm doing a lot more with.
mm.
So steward over my finances and not worrying, like not allowing myself to be stressed about money because, like I said, I know how to make it. So that's one thing that I feel that I am lacking stress in, and or or just being present with my
Mm,
kid. And just when I look at him, I know I'm blessed because God gave me this person, put this person into my life to love me unconditionally when I was lacking the love, right?
mm,
Because I grew up sometimes feeling unloved and seeking out that love from so many different sources. I have someone to love me every day, no matter what happens. He loves me and he shows me and he smiles and he kisses me and hugs me. So it's all of those things that allow me to be with God and allow Him to show up in my life every single day and honor Him accordingly
mm,
based on all those dynamics in my life.
mm. This, I think that is instructive, but it's just refreshing to kind of hear that activity. I want to talk about the future. With just the reality of the landscape that we're living in, right? And I think though outside is opening up, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's the uncertainty, right? When you think about the business that we're in, I am one of those people like film, just exhibition experiences, traveling around the world. You and I kindred in that, like traveling around the world, having live experiences for people is close to my heart. But we look at the reality of just what we've lived through. And I can imagine, having these conversations with young people about the business and its projections over the next 18 months to 24 months. Just how do you infuse that your faith, or even do you, not even saying literally, but how do you talk to young people about the reality of the business, right? Given what we're facing, right? How do you can present it in a way, and how do you for yourself think about your work moving forward, right? I think to some degree you have some security because one, who you are in Christ, but then also you're like, all right, financially I do what I need to do, so like I'm not, it's not as volatile as it could be. So just what is the future? What is your dialogue around the future with God and with young people, in terms of them setting their careers around this, recognizing what's just happened?
Yeah, I would say my advice for myself and for other people is to be open minded and tap into your gifts and talents that you already have and see them as transferable skills. Everything that we have inside of us can be applied to anything that we want to do, to be honest. Everything that we have, all of the tools and the gifts and the talents, which every single one of us possess, has the ability to do whatever our heart desires. We just have to align ourselves with it, go for it, go after it, not be afraid to fail at it. Those transferable skills, I can't stress that enough, because although the live business has been on pause, I've been able to still do so much with the skills that I've acquired, whether it's just being organized, or knowing how to communicate with people on many different levels, and knowing how to cultivate my relationships and my network. All of those things are valuable in the life space, but they all transfer into just business in general. So I think that just being open-minded to any possibilities and studying your craft, but studying other opportunities within the live entertainment industry, or even in the music industry, or even in any other industry that you want to carve out for yourself. Just don't be afraid to fail at it. Don't be afraid to make a few mistakes. Go for it. Apply yourself. Know that you can't do it alone. I would say reach out to people who are like-minded, who share your vision or share your passion, and build with them. So many things. So many things.
There's the nothing wasted piece of, even in the work, whether paused or not, there's opportunities, and everything that you have learned, particularly if you cultivate it with intention, will serve you and will
Yeah.
serve others. And then this other piece, I have to ask you this question. I think around discernment. I mean, if you want to always talk about just viral moments for people around, memes and questions, I think people wrestle with discernment. And given the nature of the work that you do, maintaining relationships is so important. And then also your core, your village around you that supports your career, that requires a discernment. But I think for people who don't know, or not necessarily, faith isn't just still something that they're still navigating very nascently. How did you navigate discernment and knowing just who to really lean into, how to maintain relationships, where you should keep at arm's distance? I'm pretty sure that that's been a consistent theme, but could you kind of describe or give some wisdom for those around that area of your life?
Discernment is
In relationships.
super key.
Yeah.
Yes, it's super key in relationships. Knowing who is who and what is what. Ultimately, knowing who's going to meet you in a certain place, which energies to take on, and how to serve accordingly is super key when it comes to these discerning relationships. Just knowing how to communicate with people and understanding them, showing empathy, like really, really wanting to learn about who people are, being able to discern relationships versus people who truly want to meet you and get to know you and grow you and grow with you. It's just key to listen. I think listening is ultimately how you can discern what it is and what it ain't when it comes to people. Truly listening to them, because they will tell you who they are if you really care to know.
That's a word, y'all. That's a word. Candace then dropped that in there in Angelino fashion. She gave you the word.
Yes.
This has been like just I think such a gift. I think one, because I think you speak in a very matter of fact and accessible way about practically what your faith journey has been and what it looks like. The vulnerability I think people can relate to if they're honest with themselves about just the areas of their life that they've struggled with. And I think I think when you recognize there's a need for Do you have a need? That's where God feels comes in. And so I just hear that consistently. But also just there's an energy that I think people have taken for granted until especially this past year, where the energy I have to do my work, to get out of bed, I need to have a larger purpose in all that I do. And then if I'm in a space where nobody's watching, doing my work with the highest integrity. Um, and
Yes.
that includes the discipline of me, pursuing my craft because I'm not in a office building. There's so much to the word integrity that you consistently have shared over time about how important that is to you. But I think that is a word for everyone to hear. I got to ask, what do you have coming up, and how do people find you?
Yeah. So I have a lot of great partnerships coming up through Live Out Live, my organization. A lot of great opportunities to provide resources and access for the students of the business, mentorships for students of the business, opportunities, working opportunities. I recently put out a poster that I'm hiring some people to come in and learn from me about the live entertainment space. I have a few amazing clients that I'm super excited about working with and helping them build in the live space once things, kind of come back. And whatever comes to mind. I'm just super excited about whatever else to come. Like, I don't know what else is coming. I mean, I have a few things coming, but ultimately, God is just throwing different things at me every single day, and what matters and what will make the most impact. And I'm, building them out as they come. But I'm very open to all of that. But I can be found on. I have a website, liveoutlive.com, or on socials at liveoutlive_LA is my company platform. Or I can always be emailed directly for an informational, or for anyone who's interested in learning more about my company at info@liveoutlive.com.
Y'all, I've just really enjoyed this conversation because I just
So have I.
it's this life is not easy, man. It's just not. And in this life there will be trouble. And I think when we recognize and we see and hear stories of brothers and sisters who have done just great work at the highest levels, but are honest about the difficulties along that, I think it gives us encouragement that we can do it. We could be healthy. We could be on a journey and make it. And I think I think that's a message of the time. And so I think on behalf of those seeing and listening, I want to thank you. I thank you for being faithful to the work. 10 plus years navigating it not being linear, you being faithful to the work, you being faithful to highest of integrity, not only for yourself, but those institutions in which you work, those
Yes.
partnerships in which you establish. I'm so thankful for you fighting the good fight of the faith in your own life, and ultimately to create opportunities and create a model, not only in your home, but obviously in the family and the institution that you're creating around the next generation of brothers and sisters who will
Yes.
be in these near places. So, Candace, I thank you. We love you. We support you. And we're so excited to see God continue to work in your life. So, all love to you. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you so much for allowing me to. This is an incredible opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Take care.